These are fateful days in Israel as we're excited and also praying as we anticipate the return of the hostages from Gaza. But this is not the end of the story. Israel is in the midst of a tough strategic dilemma. Alongside joy over the expected release of the hostages, there is uncertainty and heavy international pressure peaking with the expected visit of United States President Donald Trump. A senior Hamas official has declared that the hostages will be released on Monday, while in Israel, there were also preparations being made for the unlikely possibility that some hostages might be released even earlier. Also, it is not clear which of the fallen hostages will return and when. However, we do know that when the hostages are released, they will be transferred to a special force and flown out of Gaza straight to hospitals in Israel, and we will bring you all the details on what the release of the hostages will look like. Of course, on Monday, we are expecting a brief visit by the United States President Donald Trump to Israel. He's scheduled to land at the airport in Tel Aviv and drive straight to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, for an address to the plenum. And there are no plans for him to meet with the hostages at this time, likely due to their medical condition. This is billed as the shortest president visit to Israel of all time, as immediately after the address to the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, President Trump will drive straight back to the airport, get back on Air Force One for the flight to Cairo in Egypt, where he will chair a regional summit. In total, he's scheduled to be on the ground for a bit less than 4 hours. However, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff, as well as his daughter Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner, arrived in Israel on Saturday evening and spoke at a rally in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. They were cheered along with President Trump, while the crowd bowed Prime Minister Netanyahu in a possible sign of things to come. And speaking of possible signs of things to come, there are new revelations of secret coordination and training between the IDF and the armies of some Arab states, where lessons learned in Gaza, particularly about fighting in tunnels underneath the ground, has been shared. And we'll tell you more about that. And meanwhile, in the midst of the Israeli withdrawal, Hamas has announced a mass mobilization in the Gaza Strip. Thousands of terrorists are deployed across Gaza, coming up on tunnels and operating openly in the streets of the Gaza Strip. Hamas is also declaring that it will not disarm, which is one of the key points in President Trump's plan for ending this war. One reason that they do not want to disarm is that there are other armies and militias inside the Gaza Strip who want to take control there, and clashes between Hamas and these militias have escalated significantly in the last 48 hours. Clans that are opposed to Hamas have staged attacks against them in Beit Lahia and in Sabra, while Hamas flags have been spotted in neighborhoods of some Palestinian cities in Judea and Samaria, right behind me, ahead of the release of the Palestinian security prisoners. How will this in turn Palestinian power struggle play out? We'll have to watch and see. In the meantime, things are also not getting any simpler in Lebanon, and over the weekend, Israel hit a Hezbollah-controlled park where dozens of heavy earth-moving vehicles were stored, destroying most of them. These machines were meant to rebuild Hezbollah's tunnels and other terrorist infrastructure in southern Lebanon, but they won't be available for that purpose any longer. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host Yair Pinto, and together with me is Shoshani, and we're bringing you all the truth about what is happening in Israel. So make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. In Israel, we continue to prepare to receive the hostages who are expected to be released by Monday morning. But the IDF has put teams from special units on high alert in the Gaza Strip in case they are released before the scheduled time. The return of the hostages will bring with it a rare moment of unity here in the country of Israel, but behind it lies a complex reality of pressures, interests, and an unclear future for Gaza and for Israel. The terrorist organization is demanding the release of 250 life sentence prisoners, and they want some names that are not on the list, but Israel has made it clear that the list will not change and these big names will stay in prison. Meanwhile, the BBC is reporting that more than 500,000 residents have already returned to northern Gaza, while Hamas ordered the mobilization of about 7,000 of its security forces and appointed 5 governors with military backgrounds in order to reassert control over areas in the Gaza Strip that were evacuated by the IDF. Hamas has deployed terrorists and declares that they will take revenge on collaborators. Also, in an interview with the Qatari news portal El Arabiya, Hamas spokesperson Hazam Qasem said that there are difficulties in locating the fallen hostages and that they were presented to the United States and to the mediators. And elsewhere, a Palestinian source told the BBC Hamas has not changed. It still believes in weapons and in violence. That should not surprise anybody, because this is a terrorist organization that seeks the destruction of Israel. And meanwhile, something that has surprised many people is the reports of security chaos in the Gaza Strip as Hamas terrorists confront clans in Beit Lahia and in Sabra. There are reports that the son of a senior Hamas official is amongst the fatalities, and there is no signs of things calming down. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us the full interview of the shortest visit in history by a sitting US president to Israel. Meanwhile, special White House envoy Steve Witkoff was visibly moved by the tens of thousands gathered in Hosted Square in Tel Aviv on Saturday evening and praised Israelis for the courage to come for peace, telling them, "You inspire the whole world." The crowd cheered Trump and Kushner, thanked the soldiers, and joked about the complicated negotiations, saying that Witkoff did a great job there. During her remarks, Ivanka Trump directly addressed the hostages, telling them her father sees and heals always. And meanwhile, the Washington Post broke the story over the weekend about secret cooperation between Israel and several Arab states in quiet meetings held in different cities around the world. Under the United States auspices, the representatives shared intelligence, set up joint training exercises for IDF and Arab soldiers, and discussed an influence operation against Iran. So we have a lot to talk about today. So let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what is happening in Israel on day 737 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the control of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, I want to call on you to help us and spread the truth. Look at the hatred and the anti-Semitism around the world. We, at Boots on the Ground, fight every day for the truth, making sure to spread it and what is really happening in Israel so that you'll know how to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. If you want to help us, make sure to hit the like button, make sure to leave a comment, and share this video. And the best thing you can do, as I keep saying, is to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. So, to start, we'll give you a look at what happened inside the Gaza Strip over the weekend, as the IDF has already redeployed to the area of the Yellow Line. More than a day has passed since the ceasefire went into effect, and there is still no reliable timetable for the release of the hostages. Although there is an estimate that the release will begin on Monday, possibly very early in the morning, but preparations are also being made for a possibility that some of the hostages will be released sooner. And meanwhile, a senior Hamas official said on Saturday that disarming the terrorist organization Hamas is one of the basic conditions of the agreement is not on the table at this moment. And thousands of terrorists have already come up of tunnels and are being deployed on the streets across Gaza. The understanding in Israel is that Hamas needs to organize logistically and move the living hostages as well as the deceased ones from their current locations to a single location that will be a collecting point before the release can proceed. According to the agreement, the living hostages will be returned first, and it is possible that all of them will be handed over at once to the Red Cross and not in batches at different points. This will be followed by the handing over of remains of hostages who were murdered in captivity. But in Israel, as noted, they are also preparing for other scenarios, including the possibility that Hamas will violate the understandings, and they also assess that the terrorist organization will not release all the deceased hostages by Monday morning. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir conducted a field tour on Saturday in the Gaza Strip with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, and the commander of the United States Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper. Other senior IDF officials were also presented to this tour. They visited the returnees' compound at the Re'im base and observed the IDF's preparations to receive the hostages. The IDF spokesperson said that the CENTCOM commander and the Chief of Staff held a joint panel, which senior IDF commanders were included, in which they discussed the operational picture in the near and in the far arenas and the IDF's disposition along the current lines inside the Gaza Strip in accordance with the outline of the ceasefire agreement and the return of the hostages. The statement continued saying, as part of the ongoing coordination efforts, the IDF is in continuous contact with the United States Army Central Command to plan and to implement the agreement in a way that will allow the continued safeguarding of the State of Israel and its security. This meeting constitutes an additional reinforcement of the close strategic and operational connection between the IDF and the United States military. Upon their departure from the Gaza Strip, the commander of the Golani Brigade, Colonel S.H., addressed his soldiers telling them, "You are the victory generation, heroes of the force and this glory. Thanks to you, the hostages are coming back home. Thanks to you, we have defeated Hamas." Of course, Hamas is also making statements, many of them in the form of complaints. They are complaining about how only 195 of the 250 security prisoners being released this week as part of the deal that they agreed to will be those serving life sentences. They wanted some even more evil and wicked men who had committed even more evil acts of terrorism and murder against Israel to be released than what is planned to happen. For instance, a senior Palestinian official told the BBC that the United States envoy Steve Witkoff was asked to raise with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu the demand to release 7 senior Palestinian prisoners, including the terrorist Ahmed Sadat and Marwan Barghouti, but Israel flatly refused. Israel's position is that the list of released terrorists was agreed with the mediators, approved by the government, and cannot be changed in practice. At this stage, it is not clear whether the dispute over these identities of the prisoners will also lead to any delays in the agreement, but Palestinian sources claim that Hamas is in fact has no choice but to agree to what has already been approved and set in motion. However, there are also extreme voices demanding to blow up everything, but for now, it does not seem to be a likely scenario, especially since the terrorists expected to be released have already informed their families. However, changes may still occur in the prisoner list if, for example, a particular terrorist refuses deportation, as happens in previous deals. In such case, other prisoners who were pre-approved as an option will be released, and as noted, a senior Hamas official told the French news agency AFP on Saturday that disarming Hamas, which is a central part of Trump's plan to end this war in Gaza, is not on the table. According to him, the demand to hand over the weapons is not on the table and is not negotiable. Yet, even today, in Israel, they assess that Hamas will do everything so that the agreement succeeds, after the heavy pressure exerted on them by the United States and the Muslim countries. Sources familiar with the details say that until today, Hamas has abided by the agreements, even if, while deliberately wearing down the process, and did what it said it would do according to the agreement. Sources familiar with the details say that all sides will do everything for the agreement to succeed. No one has an interest in disrupting things, not even Hamas. And meanwhile, the civil defense in the Gaza Strip, a body managed by Hamas, announced today that more than 500,000 Gazans have returned to the northern part of the Gaza Strip since the ceasefire came into effect. Alongside this, according to the BBC, Hamas has returned about 7,000 security personnel to areas that the IDF were evacuated from and appointed 5 new governors, all with background in its military wing. Hamas also sent out phone calls and text messages to all its operatives that there is a general mobilization to purge Gaza of lawbreakers and collaborators with Israel. As a quick side note to this story, I have to wonder how everyone in Hamas still has a phone that works and is charged up. For months we've been hearing that there's no food in Gaza, no electricity, no water services, etc. But somehow, all of these Hamas guys still have phones that are able to receive text messages, and despite the lack of electricity, these phones are charged and ready to be used. That's very strange, but let me know what you think about this in the comment section. In any case, a senior Hamas official told the BBC over the weekend that this mobilization is necessary because Hamas will not leave Gaza at the mercy of thieves and militias supported by Israel. Our weapons are legitimate and exist to resist the occupation. They will remain as long as the occupation continues, according to Hamas. On that note, there is documentation from the Gaza Strip that Hamas has indeed begun brutally punishing those it calls thieves and collaborators. This reportedly includes clans and armed gangs that have dared to say that they no longer wish to be ruled by Hamas. Sometimes, but not always, they received some support from Israel. Whatever support they received in the past has now been discounted with the implementation of the ceasefire, which has included an IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. For instance, a recent clash between Hamas men and the Abu Warda clan in the Gaza port area resulted in fatalities and dozens of wounded on both sides. Additionally, there are reports of clashes in the southern parts of the Gaza Strip between Hamas's Sham unit and the El Majidiyah clan in Khan Yunis, in which more than 22 terrorists were eliminated. All this while Hamas is trying to prevent the population from moving around the area and to return control to its hands. And amidst these developments, a retired Palestinian security officer who served for years in the Palestinian Authority said in a recent interview that he feels the situation will slide into another round of internal bloodshed. He noted that Hamas has not changed. It still believes that weapons and violence are the only means to keep its movements alive. With this in mind, the IDF has made it clear that it reserves for itself the right to strike and eliminate terrorists who will try to approach or attack IDF forces moving forward. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to bring you all the details on the release of the hostages and everything related to these developments. Before we move to Mati Shoshani to get all the details about the Trump visit to Israel, I want to call on you to hit that subscribe button and remain tuned to what's happening boots on the ground in Israel. I also want to talk to you for a moment about a very important organization that TBN Israel is proud to partner with. So this war may be changing shape, but it's far from over. And in every moment of crisis, Magen David Adom's volunteers are first on the scene. Just like always, they treat the wounded, stop the bleeding, evacuate the injured, and provide life-saving care, sometimes under fire. But this level of readiness doesn't happen on its own. It takes medical supplies, armored gear, ambulances, and hundreds of hours of training. And most importantly, it takes people like you to stand behind them. Even when it feels quiet, Magen David Adom is not standing still. They're training, restocking, upgrading, and preparing for the next call, because it will come. Now, it is our turn to show up. So go to savelifeisrael.com and support Magen David Adom so that they can keep saving lives anytime, anywhere, no matter what. Again, that's savelifeisrael.com. And now, we'll move to a quick update on the release of the hostages. All the families of the hostages and the abductees in Israel received a phone call from their intelligence officer over the weekend with an assessment regarding the condition of their loved ones. The understanding in Israel is that since not all the remains of the deceased hostages can be located by Hamas to be returned right away, the international task force sent to deploy in the Gaza Strip as part of this agreement will begin immediately to try and locate them themselves. This international task force will be composed of troops from the United States, from Egypt, from Turkey, from Qatar, and from Israel in an integrated command structure. 200 American soldiers have already landed in the country ahead of the implementation of this agreement, and their role is to assist from a center that will be established in Israel for coordinating issues related to the Gaza Strip until a permanent government is established there, inside Gaza. The idea is that any intelligence information on the locations of the deceased hostages will be examined in depth until all of them are found. And since the 20 living hostages are expected to return to the country in complex medical conditions after 2 years being held in captivity, there are preparations to immediately bring them to hospitals for treatment, and in the field there will be doctors who will make real-time decisions. According to a report in the Saudi Ashrak news portal, which cited a source familiar with the negotiations, all 20 living hostages will be transferred to the Red Cross in one batch on Monday. The understanding in Israel is that Hamas needs to organize logistically and move the living and the deceased hostages from their current locations to a single collection point before the release. And meanwhile, humanitarian aid organizations are demanding that Israel open additional crossings to bring aid inside the Gaza Strip. Now let's move on to the visit by the United States President Donald Trump on Monday, which will be followed by a visit to Cairo for a symbolic signing ceremony for the agreement with the participation of a series of European leaders invited by Egypt. No senior Israeli official was invited to participate in this ceremony, which I kind of find very strange, and let me know what you think about this in the comments. And meanwhile, the envoys of the United States President Donald Trump, Steve Witkoff, and Jared Kushner, who are visiting Israel, took part in a rally at the Hosted Square on Saturday evening in Tel Aviv. Alongside them, Kushner's wives and the president's daughter, Ivanka Trump, also arrived unexpectedly. According to the organizers, 400,000 people attended the event. And Witkoff opened his remarks by declaring, "This is the most powerful sight I have seen. All our hearts beat as one as we gather here in Tel Aviv for peace, unity, and hope in this sacred place called Hosted Square. I only wish the president could be here. He would have loved this so much." When he thanked Trump, loud applause and cheers were heard from the crowd. Witkoff described the American president as a humanitarian of the highest order and added, "He has proven again that bold leadership and moral clarity can change both history and the world. We all owe President Trump gratitude for the depths of our hearts." In the toughest times, he refused to accept the idea that peace in the Middle East is impossible. He brought together countries that had previously been divided amongst themselves because of generations of enmity and showed us that shared peace is stronger than shared pain. History will remember that when others doubted, the president delivered and believed. He is the greatest president in the history of the United States, and we are here thanks to him. He showed the world that strength and peace go hand in hand. They are not opposites, they are partners. The weekly rally was held, as noted, ahead of the release of the hostages, and some organizers said that they hoped it would be the last such gathering. And according to the agreement, Hamas is required to release the hostages without ceremonies as in previous deals, and the terrorist organization has already announced that they do not know where all the deceased hostages are, and Israel's intelligence echelon assesses that it is possible that not all of the deceased will return by the end of the deadline. And here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report on every development on this matter, so keep spreading the truth, share, and follow us. Israel stands at the global front in this war with the radical jihadist Islamic terrorist organization that is flooding the world, and Israel is losing the area of the public diplomacy. I just been abroad, and it's sad to see all of these signs that are calling to free Gaza from a terrorist organization instead of blaming Hamas for all the suffering of their own people. Let's change this. Let's change this by sharing the truth of what's happening in this region. So TBN Israel is here to fight for the truth, and help us. Help us by liking this comment, leaving a comment, and also sharing with people that want to know what's happening on the ground in Israel. And of course, make sure to hit that subscribe button to help us reach more people around the world. And now, let's move on to TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani, who will bring us all the details of the visit to Israel by US President Donald Trump on Monday. Mati and I will of course be here to broadcast a speech to you minute by minute live, so stay tuned to TBN Israel YouTube channel for all the truth and information. Now, Mati, the clock is ticking and the tension is at its peak. As an entire country is holding its breath together with the families of the hostages, more than 2 years after October 7, 2023, the release of the hostages and the end of this war is closer than ever. If there are no last-minute delays or glitches, the living hostages will be released on Monday morning, all of them, and alongside them, a large number of the fallen. However, even now, there are still no lists, no timetable, and the fear that something will go wrong hovers over everything. But one thing is known right now: the shift, historic visit to the United States President to Israel, and also, why does it seem that the Middle Eastern countries and the European countries can agree to this deal? Can you please lock us in, let us know what's going on in this region, and what are we expected to see in the future?
President Trump comes to the Middle East for a historic visit that takes place as he lays the foundations for a historic reshifting of the power balance here in the Middle East. Now let me explain everything that's going into this, because this is nothing short of incredible, nothing short of something we're going to be talking about for many years to come. First and foremost, no one else was successful in doing this. And I know this sounds like something President Trump would say himself, but he's right. He is correct. Multiple other governments tried, multiple other leaders tried, and none of them were able to bring this conversation, bring this arrangement to fruition in the way the Trump administration was able to do it in such a short amount of time. Now, the story here is the combination of all the big details. It is a combination of the pressure on Hamas through the Turks, the Qataris, the Saudis, and other agencies and countries in the region. It's the immense pressure from the American administration on others in this region to bring forth the agreement. And it's the pressure on Israel and every other player continuously pushing and churning forward to make sure that this agreement takes place. Because there have been many causes in the last couple of days leading up to the signing of the negotiation agreement. There were many causes and reasons and clauses in the agreement for people to back out of it, for Israel to back out, for Hamas to back out. But it's the continuous pressure on every front that really brought this to the moment where we saw those pictures late last week of the smiles, the handshakes, the signatures of leaders from around the world, including Israel, signing this agreement. And the moment we're prepping for, the arrival of President Donald Trump in Israel, then followed by the ceremonies both in Israel and in Egypt, this is a unique moment in time, a unique moment in history that we need to be paying attention to. This is nothing short of the kind of events that will be talked about for many years to come, nothing short of the type of historical moments that will be taught and spoken about in history classes, in schools in the years to come, because this was not something easy, it was not something simple, it was not obvious that this would take place. So, as I'm standing here, it's Sunday. Tomorrow, Monday, we're expecting to see President Donald Trump arrive in Israel. And let me tell you, over the last couple of days, we've seen the Israeli government and the Israeli people prepare for this visit. There have been massive protests in favor of the agreement. There have been flags hung across Highway number 1, which is just over there, near where I'm standing right now, the main highway leading into Jerusalem, where President Trump will be traveling and where Israeli and US flags are hanging, and there's a huge amount of anticipation and preparation, both in the IDF, the Israeli government, and the Israeli public for the upcoming expected release of the hostages. That's really the key point here. The release of the hostages, the ceasefire agreement, which is already kicked into effect, and the historical speech of President Trump, followed by the agreement that's about to take place in Egypt. So I mentioned early on that this is a historic visit, both in the importance of it, but also in how much is being achieved in such a short amount of time. So let's walk through the very packed schedule of the upcoming Trump visit. So first of all, at about 9:20 a.m. tomorrow morning, Air Force One is planned to land in the Ben Gurion airport. By the way, Israeli news is full of reports of diverted flights and changes to the flight plans to allow the needed security arrangements to be made for President Trump's arrival at the Ben Gurion airport. Because of the short time period that he's here on the ground, there will be no large ceremonies in the Ben Gurion airport on the tarmac as is typically expected, but there will be a meet and greet with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israeli President Herzog. Then Highway number 1, which is the main artery traveling east-west in Israel, will be closed in both directions as President Trump makes it up to the mountains of Jerusalem in what's known as the Beast. It's a very large motorcade that's planned. By the way, I saw already yesterday in Jerusalem the security preparations and the logistical preparations for this upcoming visit, with fences and barricades and even tarp covers on certain areas to safeguard the entire route in which President Trump is traveling being carried out. At about 10:10 a.m., President Trump is planned to arrive at the Knesset. He's going to enter in through one of the back entrances. He's going to sign the guest book, and then he's going to have a quick work huddle in the Prime Minister's office with Netanyahu and President Herzog. Then President Trump is planned to meet with the families of the hostages. And this is key because President Trump has been an amazing advocate and ally of the hostage families for many months now. Many report that he's been personally touched by the effect of meeting with the hostage families, and he's planned to meet with them in person. Now, around 11 a.m. tomorrow, President Trump is planned to address the Knesset General Assembly, which is a very important and historic moment. He doesn't stop at a hotel. He's not going anywhere else. He's not even going to the Western Wall, just straight to the Knesset for meetings. And then at about 1 p.m., he's planned to depart back to the airport and fly to Sharm el-Sheikh, which is in the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. The times, of course, are not final yet, but this is sort of the big picture. And he goes there for a signing of a historic moment with Arab countries that we're going to discuss in just a moment. But I want to discuss before we go on to that is what's really the key point for Israeli society and for the Israeli people with this entire agreement. It's the story of the hostages. We've been waiting. We have been at the ends of our seat since, Thursday night when the agreement was signed, just waiting to see the hostages released. The Hamas has a window that is anytime between now, which is Sunday midday, and Monday, end of the day, to release those hostages. And believe me, people are tense, people are anticipating this moment. Last night, there was a massive rally in Tel Aviv in what's known as the Hostage Square, where actually Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner spoke to rally people in Israel in anticipation and joy over the expected return of the hostages. Guys, this has been something that Israeli public has been demonstrating for, calling for, praying for, talking about for 2 years now, and it's all culminating in this expected moment. So I was saying that the hostage release is expected anytime between right now and Monday after the Trump visit. And his visit to this country is part of what I would call a victory lap, sort of celebrating the return of the hostages. He's planned to meet with the families of the hostages. And even though there's an expectation or hope that some of the hostages will be released today, Sunday, before his arrival, President Trump isn't planned to actually meet in person with any of the hostages, or supposed to be receiving medical care or such a psychological treatment, and we're not actually sure what state they'll be released in. So he's planned to meet with the families of the hostages, but not with the hostages themselves. By the way, that moment is supposed to be televised. His meeting with the families is supposed to be televised to the world, because Trump wants people to know, the Israeli government wants people to know how hard it's been on the families of those hostages. So as I mentioned, President Trump continues from Israel to Sharm el-Sheikh for a summit with the Arab world. a summit that is a meeting of leaders from around the Arab world to sign a deal. Now, let's continue with Trump's schedule. He lands at Sharm el-Sheikh at about 1:45 p.m. At about 2:30, there's an expected symbolic signing that marks the end of the war and the terms of it. Then there's an international conference on the day after in the Gaza Strip and what's expected of that. Egyptian President Assisi hosts this conference. Arab leaders and European leaders all attend, including France's President Emmanuel Macron, Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz, and UK Prime Minister Keith Starmer. Notably, Israel does not participate in this signing event that's taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh. It's the Arab countries that are part of the regional deal and the Rebuilding Gaza deal that are participating in this, together with several European countries. By the way, this shows you how serious the US administration is about really doing this the right way. They've gathered the alliances, they've gathered the people that are needed, they've done everything that's needed to really make this happen in a proper way. So let's shift gears and talk about one of the biggest winners of this entire season, this entire negotiation, and that is President Erdogan of Turkey and the Turkish people and government, who've really upgraded their position, their role in the Middle East as part of this agreement. They were, in the opinion of most people involved, the deciding factor in making this deal go through and come to fruition. They were sort of the squeeze on Hamas leadership, both locally and internationally, that was needed to bring them to the table. And Ankara is now positioning itself to be a central player in the post-war game that's taking place here, in rebuilding the Gaza Strip, in safeguarding the situation on the ground there, and in also reshaping interests in the Middle East. They've been talking a lot about the situation in Syria, but they've wanted for a while now to re-engage as a big player, a mediator, a kingmaker, a deciding factor in everything that happens here. And this is that moment. They've done so incredibly. They've shown the world their effect and their ability to bring change. And now they reap the fruit as a big player in the agreement between Israel and Hamas. You can see this change in the way the US is addressing the Turks. They're now dealing with them as a major player. They're cooperating with them on multiple levels, and they've also sold multiple weapon systems to the Turks, which is something they've wanted and desired for a very long time. Let me summarize. The next 72 hours are going to be dramatic and fast-paced and full of both symbolism and also a huge amount of logistics. On the Israeli side, the Israeli government and IDF and the families of the hostages are doing everything they can preparing to receive the hostages. The Israeli public has been very concerned with their physical state, their spiritual, their emotional state after 2 years in Hamas captivity. We've seen the footage of many of these people come back, and it does not look good. Additionally, we're expecting to receive President Trump, which is a huge event that's taking place here. He's coming here to really seal the deal on what's been a dramatic week of negotiations, both for Israel and other players here in the region. And then that is followed up by President Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh, bringing together the leaders of the Arab world and several European countries to really show what this new Middle East is going to look like. And I expect by the time we exit the end of the Sukkot holiday, which is Tuesday night, we're going to be living in a completely different region. A region where the hostages are back home, a region where there's a agreement for financial prosperity and cooperation to rebuild the Gaza Strip, participated by multiple different countries, and a moment in time where we see a unity, a working together, a spirit of camaraderie, both with the Israeli people and also with the United States government, that brought to this moment. And for the people of Israel, this is a moment of hope, a moment of peace, a moment of joy, first and foremost for the return of the hostages, and secondly, over the fact that we're seeing things change in a positive degree, a way that is no more war, no more violence, but rather possible prosperity and rebuilding of this region. And we all know that that is a thing we're looking forward to and needing in this region. Keep praying for Israel, keep praying for what's happening here. These are deciding moments in the history of this region and the Israeli people, and be blessed. Now back to Yair Pinto.
Thank you very much, Mati, for bringing us all the critical details and, of course, giving us a look at which forces are operating behind the scenes in the Middle East. And guys, keep spreading the truth, share our content, most importantly, hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another update from Israel. So the Washington Post news portal published a report on Saturday, including recent revealed American documents showing that despite the harsh public condemnations of Israel by Arab states, in practice, behind the scenes, the picture is way different. Even at the height of the fighting in the Gaza Strip, their close security cooperation with Israel continued. The documents record the establishment of a security mechanism called the Regional Security Construct, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Qatar, with Kuwait and Oman defined as potential partners. The mechanism was in fact a secret institutionalized regional system of meetings, trainings, and information sharing intended to deal with the Iranian threat and to strengthen military ties between the Arab states and Israel. Participation in the meeting was done covertly, and all sessions were defined as sponsored and confidential, while the mechanism was established and operated in coordination with the United States Central Command. According to the documents, which the Washington Post revealed together with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, ICIJ, in the past 3 years, a series of security conferences and drills took place in various locations. This included Bahrain and Jordan, as well as the El Ubaida base in Qatar, and even at 4th Campbell in Kentucky, in which senior officials from Israel and the Arab states participated alongside CENTCOM personnel. One of the documents described international training in identifying and destroying underground tunnels, which we can assume included lessons learned by the IDF battling Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Another exercise was held last September in Egypt, in which soldiers from the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Egypt, Greece, India, Britain, and Qatar also took part. According to the report, the declared goal of the regional security mechanism is to enable intelligence sharing, radar connectivity, cyber communications, and real-time coordination of military operations. Beginning in 2022, understandings were signed on coordinated air defensive systems against Iranian missiles and UAVs, and by 2024, 6 of the 7 participating countries had already been linked to an American system that integrates their radar and sensor data with that of the United States military. According to the documents, 2 of the countries whose names were not disclosed even passed their own information to a United States Air Force squadron, and all the countries now use the encrypted chat system intended for direct communications with Washington and with the Allies. The documents described Iran as the central component connecting the sides. One CENTCOM presentation refers to it as its proxies as an axis of evil, and displays a map marking missiles in Gaza and in Yemen. And the United States, according to the documents, sees this framework as a means to establish a narrative of regional prosperity and cooperation, and to counter Tehran's claims that it supposedly defends the Palestinians. The United States also worked to expand its regional cooperation into the cyber and the information domain. One of the documents promises that by the end of 2026, a joint Middle East cyber center is expected to be established to concentrate training and drills in digital defense, as well as a regional information fusion center that will enable information fusion on the planning and the execution of combined operations. The Cyber Center is expected to serve as a training and instruction hub for both Israeli and Arab experts, while the Regional Information Center will enable the countries to share intelligence data in real time and to coordinate joint actions in areas of conflict. Saudi Arabia, according to the documents, played a particularly active role within this mechanism, sharing intelligence with Israel and with other Arab partners and providing regional security briefings on Syria, Yemen, and ISIS activity. One notable meeting took place last January at 4th Campbell in Kentucky, where participants learned to identify offensive tunnels common in Gaza and destroy them. In another meeting, Saudi officials and the United States intelligence personnel briefed participants of the activities of Russia, Turkey, and the Kurds in Syria, alongside a review of Houthi threats in Yemen and ISIS in Iraq and also in Syria. However, the documents themselves explicitly clarify to all participants that the partnership does not constitute a new alliance and that all meetings must be conducted discreetly. Of course, in public, Arab leaders have continued to attack Israel from every international platform. At the United Nations, the Emir of Qatar called the action in Gaza a war of racial extermination against the Palestinian people, and the Saudi foreign minister accused Israel of starving the Palestinians and of ethnic cleansing, just to give two examples of this situation. But on that note, it's important to point out that the documents indicate that alongside the security cooperation, Arab states continue to rely on the United States as a guarantor of their security, but also fear Israel. Experts quoted in the reports explained that the Gulf states see Israel as a military power that is almost impossible to restrain. This is fascinating to me personally, since Israel is a country with a population of 10 million people, and the surrounding Arab and Muslim countries have a combined population approaching 500 million, but somehow they're afraid of us. I'd like to hear from you in the comment section about why you think that is, and what's going to happen next from this situation. Are we going to have a peace agreement with all these countries, more than just this security behind-the-scenes cooperation? In any case, Professor Thomas Geniot of the University of Ottawa said that the Gulf states fear an unrestrained Israel, but they depend on the United States and at the same time are anxious about Iran's growing strength. In Washington's view, this cooperation is intended to continue the momentum of the Abraham Accords and gradually establish security normalization between Israel and the Arab world. In this context, it is interesting to note that Washington has announced a deployment of 200 American soldiers to assist in monitoring the implementation of the ceasefire agreement inside Gaza, and President Trump declares that the soldiers from Arab countries that are participating in this security mechanism may join as well. The states in this region and this regional mechanism did express public support for Trump's 21-point plan to end this war, which includes establishing an international force to operate in Gaza and train a new Palestinian policing force. However, none of them has officially committed to sending troops to Gaza. Here at TBN Israel, we will continue to report the truth and make sure that you will receive all the information without any background noise. Therefore, we need your help. You can share these videos, leave a comment, tell us where you're coming from, where you're watching, hit the like button, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. And now we're shifting our focus to the northern arena, because although the war with Hamas is currently in a ceasefire, Israel is still fighting jihadist terrorist organizations on other fronts. Overnight between Friday and Saturday, the IDF struck Hezbollah staging areas in which engineering equipment was stored that served to restore the organization's infrastructure in southern Lebanon, close to the border with Israel. According to a military source familiar with the details, these were heavy machines intended to help Hezbollah reach the organization's weapons depots, which had previously been hit by the Israeli Air Force bombings, burying tons of weaponry and ammunitions underneath the ground. Hezbollah is now making efforts to reach these burning sites in order to recover some of the launches, the missiles, and additional weapons. I've been there. There are many weapons that Hezbollah was planning to use to attack and to conquer the Galilee northern part of Israel. But for its part, Israel is continuing the policy of policing and enforcing inside Lebanon in the southern area in order to prevent Hezbollah from rebuilding its capabilities. In the IDF spokesperson announcement, it was stated, amongst other things, that the Hezbollah terrorist organization continues attempts to restore terrorist infrastructure throughout Lebanon while engaging and endangering the Lebanese civilians and using them as human shields, like all the other terrorist organizations. The presence of the equipment and the activity of Hezbollah terrorist organization in areas constitutes a violation of the understandings between Israel and Lebanon. And at the same time, during an operational activity by the IDF, the Menashe Brigade in the city of Jenin, a terrorist threw an explosive device at the paratroopers reconnaissance force that were operating in this area. the forces responded with fire and eliminated the terrorists. And according to the IDF spokesperson, there were no casualties to our troops. Now, I need to conclude by clarifying something about what's going on in Israel this week. A day when the hostages return home is a day of complete consensus in this country across all political, cultural, and ideological frameworks. It is far beyond the private joy of the families and far beyond the public relief. It is a moment of national healing, a closing of a circle that Israeli society has carried on its back for 2 years. A bleeding wound that cut into the exposed nerves of all of us will begin to heal only when the last of the hostages sets foot on Israeli soil. Without that, there is no healing. And still, even on such a day of tears and a rare sense of unity, we must not be swept into the illusion that this is the end. It is merely the beginning of another campaign. Whoever thinks that the return of the hostages closes the campaign will very quickly wake up to a reality in which it simply changes form. It is only the first stage in an agreement whose continuation is unknown. Over Israel still hovers a threat from Iran and the Houthis in Yemen. Hezbollah is still the shadow of a terrorist organization existing between Lebanon and Syria, and the rest of the countries with which we have peace agreements do not exactly love us. The next stage, called Phase B of the Trump plan, is supposed to shape the day after, and this is meant to include the disarmament of Hamas, the establishment of an alternative civil administration in the Gaza Strip, and the continuation of the ceasefire under international supervision. On paper, this is a logical and acceptable outline, but in reality, it is an almost impossible equation, and it will likely require the use of military force in order to implement it. Hamas will not give up its weapons just because it said it would by agreeing to this plan. They must be compelled to do so. But beyond that, reality simply does not wait. In Gaza, Hamas is already trying to fill the vacuum left behind by the IDF's partial withdrawal. Its gunmen have returned to the streets to signal who really rules Gaza, and there have been brutal public examples of how willing they are to use extreme violence to enforce this narrative. The demilitarization, which was a fundamental condition of the Trump plan, has become an open clause with zero chance of enforcement without an international force. The problem with this is that in Israel, there is not much appetite for this international force because the intelligence echelon doesn't believe in real enforcement carried out by actors other than the IDF. Another problem with this is part of the plan is that the United States is not eager to send its own soldiers to be part of this international force, while Arab countries are even less eager to do so, and candidly, they're probably less able to do so. Hamas knows all of this, and they are already acting to fill the void formed by this lack of willingness for the United States and its Arab allies to send their troops to act as boots on the ground, a force to stabilize the Gaza Strip. With that in mind, for Phase B of this plan to be feasible, 3 conditions are needed that are not simple to produce. First, there must be real enforcement, a mechanism which includes an international body with authorities that will ensure that Hamas truly disarms. This requires Israeli consent to a foreign presence on the ground, and the Turks are already trying to take that place, which is problematic because of long-standing tensions between Turkey and Israel. An alternative Palestinian administration is unlikely to be effective as it is required to be without the Hamas terrorist organization, but also without the Palestinian Authority, which does not recognize the State of Israel despite being received as an American partner, so-called. This theoretical Palestinian administration, therefore, requires broad legitimacy that no actor currently has. And of course, Gaza likely needs rapid reconstruction, including the repair of water and electricity infrastructure, housings, schools, livelihoods, and much more. Without a substantive, real daily change in the lives of the Gazan residents, no demilitarization will be maintained over time. Each of these 3 is a threshold condition, and together they are almost an impossible equation. And still, there is also a chance. In the return of the hostages, it creates a prolonged calm. If Israel knows how to combine security with reconstruction, and if Washington knows how to exert gentle but consistent pressure, perhaps a new, more stable reality will begin to take shape. No peace, no reconciliation, but war weariness that will be significant factors will determine the scenarios ahead. Sometimes that is all that is needed to start a change. Therefore, on the day of the hostages' return, it will be permitted to cry, to embrace, to rejoice without reservation, without pessimistic forecasts, without cold political and diplomatic analysis. It will be a rare hour of grace. But already the next day, reality will return to demand answers. The big question is whether Israel, after 2 years of pain and losses, will know how to distinguish between the end of a chapter and the end of a story, because the hostages are returning, but the hatred and the desire to destroy us is still rooted in the hearts of our enemies in Gaza, in the countries surrounding us, and of course, we'll see the hatreds of Jews raising up around the Western world. None of that is going to stop or change because the guns fall silent in Gaza. Therefore, this is the time to pray. Let's unite in prayer for the hostages to come back safely, mentally, physically. They're going to have a long way ahead of them to be somewhat normal. They'll need strength from their families, from the entire nation of Israel, and they'll need a supernatural intervention from God above. So let's pray that He will give them this peace in their hearts and will lead them back to their lives once more after 2 years in Hamas captivity. Let's pray for the families of the IDF soldiers that fell fighting in the Gaza Strip. Let's pray for them. Let's pray for wisdom to our leaders, President Trump, Prime Minister Netanyahu, and all your leaders in this situation and all the leaders of the Arab world. And let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.